The imperial palace of Draconis Prime stretched across 17 kilometers of crystalline spires and floating platforms, each one a testament to the technological supremacy of the Dracon Empire. For 3 millennia, the dragon-like beings had ruled over 47 star systems with absolute authority, their scaled hides immune to most weapons and their natural ability to survive in vacuum, making them the undisputed masters of space warfare. Prince Zethron, Forthak, lay dying in the palace's most luxurious medical suite, his once magnificent golden scales now dulled to a sickly bronze. The heir to the Dracon throne had been fighting the Crimson Wasting for 6 months, a mysterious disease that was slowly consuming his life force. The finest doctors from across the galaxy had examined him, prescribed exotic treatments, and performed surgeries using technology that could rebuild entire organs. Nothing worked. The disease was unlike anything the medical community had encountered. It attacked the very essence of what made Dracon superior, slowly draining their natural resistance to radiation, their ability to process multiple atmospheric compositions, and their legendary strength. Zethron, who once could crush steel beams with his bare claws, now struggled to lift a glass of water. His father, Emperor Vextar the Conqueror, paced the medical chamber's length with barely contained fury. The massive Dracon scales rippled with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed his emotional state, currently displaying the deep purples and angry reds of frustration and fear. Around him, the Empire's greatest minds offered increasingly desperate suggestions. "Your Imperial Majesty," squeaked Dr. Yilnith, a small insectoid being whose species specialized in viral research, "we could attempt a complete genetic reconstruction using Zephyrian crystal matrix technology." The Emperor's response was a low growl that made the chamber's reinforced walls vibrate. "You tried that 3 weeks ago. My son's condition worsened." "Perhaps," offered Admiral Kress, her forearms gesturing nervously, "we should consider reaching out to the Ethereal Collective. Their understanding of life force manipulation might—" "The Ethereals demanded tribute that would bankrupt 12 star systems," Vextar snarled, "for a treatment they admitted had only a 30% success rate." Dr. Morvain, the palace's chief physician and a fellow Dracon, approached cautiously. His silver scales were marked with the complex surgical scarification that denoted his rank among the medical caste. "Your Majesty, we have exhausted all conventional treatments within our empire and beyond. The prince's cellular structure is breaking down at a molecular level. At this rate, he has perhaps 2 weeks remaining." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hiss of the medical equipment keeping Zethron stable. The prince himself had been unconscious for 3 days, his breathing shallow and labored. Emperor Vextar turned toward the massive viewport that looked out over the palace grounds. In the distance, he could see the sprawling service sectors where the lesser species lived and worked. Humans, those peculiar bipedal mammals from a backwater world called Earth, made up a significant portion of the service staff. They had been conquered only 50 years ago, their primitive technology no match for Dracon might, but they had proven surprisingly adaptable to various forms of labor. What about the humans? The question came from an unexpected source. Princess Lyraneth, Zethron's younger sister, who had been silently observing from the chamber's shadows. The assembled advisors turned to stare at her as if she had suggested consulting with primitive bacteria. "Sister," Admiral Kress said gently, "humans are barely above pet status. Their medical knowledge extends to crude chemical compounds and invasive surgeries. They cannot even survive in most atmospheric conditions without artificial assistance." But Princess Lyraneth was known for her scholarly pursuits. Unlike most Dracons who focused purely on military conquest, she had spent considerable time studying the various species within their empire, including the humans. Their medicine is primitive, yes, but they approach problems differently. Where we use advanced technology to force solutions, they seem to have an intuitive understanding of biological systems. I have read reports of human doctors achieving unexpected results through methods our physicians would consider archaic. Dr. Morvain's scales flushed with indignation. "Your Highness, surely you cannot be serious. Human medicine is barely advanced enough to treat their own species, let alone—" "Enough." Emperor Vexitar's voice cut through the protest like a plasma blade. The ruler of the galaxy's most powerful empire was silent for a long moment, his gaze still fixed on the distant service sectors. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of desperation disguised as imperial command. "Summon their best medical personnel. All of them. Within hours, the palace's communication systems were buzzing with urgent messages sent to every human medical facility within the capital city. The response was immediate but problematic. Most human doctors were too terrified to even consider examining the dying prince. The few brave enough to accept the summons arrived at the palace gates in various states of panic and preparation. Dr. Sarah Chen, formerly of Johns Hopkins before the conquest, came with every piece of portable diagnostic equipment she could carry. Dr. James Okafor brought samples of traditional African herbal medicines alongside his conventional medical supplies. Dr. Maria Santos carried books, actual physical books on human anatomy and physiology that she had somehow managed to preserve through the occupation. But it was the last arrival that surprised everyone. Marcus Webb hadn't been summoned at all. He had simply shown up at the palace gates during the chaos, wearing his standard-issue custodial uniform and carrying a battered toolbox that contained cleaning supplies and maintenance equipment. The Dracon guards initially tried to turn him away, but Marcus was persistent in a way that only someone with nothing left to lose could be. His daughter had died from a rare genetic disorder 2 years before the conquest, and his wife had been killed during the invasion. He had spent the last 5 decades of his life, first as a hospital janitor on Earth, then as a maintenance worker in the palace, observing medical procedures and listening to conversations that others assumed he couldn't understand. "I've seen this before," he told the increasingly agitated guards. "On Earth, different symptoms, same progression. Let me help." It was Princess Lyraneth who ultimately ordered the guards to allow him entry. Something about the human's calm demeanor amid the chaos intrigued her. As the various human doctors were ushered into the medical chamber to begin their examinations, Marcus Webb followed quietly behind, his presence largely ignored by everyone except the young princess who had taken an interest in studying human behavior patterns. The real story was about to begin. The medical chamber erupted into controlled chaos as the human doctors began their examination of Prince Zethron. Dr. Chen immediately started running blood samples through her portable analyzer, her movements quick and efficient despite the obvious fear in her eyes. Dr. Okafor consulted with Dr. Morvain about the prince's recent treatments, taking careful notes as the Dracon physician rattled off a list of exotic procedures that would have been considered science fiction on Earth just decades ago. Dr. Santos spread her ancient medical texts across a nearby table, cross-referencing symptoms and searching for patterns that might have been overlooked by more advanced medical approaches. The sight of physical books in the ultra-modern medical facility seemed almost absurd, but she worked with the focused intensity of someone who understood that conventional wisdom had already failed. Marcus Webb stood in the corner, appearing to clean the same section of wall repeatedly, while his eyes remained fixed on the prince. Unlike the human doctors who were clearly overwhelmed by the alien physiology before them, Marcus seemed oddly calm. He had spent decades observing the Dracon staff, learning their language through repetition and patience, understanding their social structures through careful attention to details others ignored. "The cellular degradation is unlike anything in our databases," Dr. Chen announced after completing her initial analysis. "It's as if something is systematically destroying the molecular bonds that give Dracon scales their unique properties." Emperor Vextar's scales flickered with impatient energy. "Tell us something we don't already know, human." But Marcus had noticed something the others missed. During his years maintaining the palace's environmental systems, he had observed that Dracon physiology was remarkably sensitive to electromagnetic fields. Their scales could actually store and conduct various forms of energy, which was part of what made them such formidable warriors. However, this same adaptation might also make them vulnerable to certain types of interference. "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through the technical discussion like a whisper in a thunderstorm. The room fell silent. Dr. Morvain's scales flushed with embarrassment. Who allowed this maintenance worker to speak in the presence of His Imperial Majesty? Princess Lyraneth stepped forward. "I did, Marcus. What did you observe?" The human janitor approached the prince's bed, his movements careful and non-threatening. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the medical equipment surrounding Zethron. Before anyone could object, Marcus began examining the sophisticated monitoring devices that were tracking the prince's vital signs. His hands moved with surprising knowledge as he checked connections and read displays that should have been incomprehensible to someone of his supposed educational level. "These machines," Marcus said, pointing to a quantum resonance scanner that was monitoring the prince's cellular activity. "They're all operating on the same frequency band. Overlapping electromagnetic signatures." Dr. Chen frowned. "The equipment is properly shielded according to galactic medical standards." "Yes," Marcus agreed, "but not for long-term exposure to a being whose scales naturally amplify and store electromagnetic energy. Look at this." He pointed to readings on 3 different machines. "The interference pattern has been building up over months. It's subtle, but it's there." The human doctors gathered around the displays, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning understanding. Dr. Okafor was the first to speak. "You're suggesting the medical equipment itself might be contributing to his condition?" "Not causing it," Marcus clarified, "but definitely making it worse. Dracon scales evolved to process natural electromagnetic phenomena, solar radiation, planetary magnetic fields, cosmic background energy. But these machines are generating artificial fields that their biology isn't equipped to handle. It's like..." He paused, searching for an analogy that would make sense to the assembled aliens. "Like forcing someone to breathe pure oxygen instead of natural air. Beneficial in small doses, toxic over time." Dr. Morvain's scales rippled with skeptical patterns. "Impossible. These devices represent the pinnacle of medical technology from 17 different civilizations." But Princess Lyraneth was studying the readings with growing interest. Her own research into human problem-solving methodologies had taught her to value their unusual perspective on complex situations. "Marcus, how would you test this theory?" The janitor looked around the room, taking in the faces of beings who held the power to end his life with a single command. But he had lost everything that mattered to him years ago, and the academic puzzle before him was more compelling than his fear. "Turn off everything except basic life support for 1 hour," he said simply. "Monitor the prince's cellular activity with handheld devices only. Nothing that generates a sustained electromagnetic field. If I'm right, you should see a slight improvement in his cellular regeneration rate." The suggestion sent shockwaves through the assembled medical team. Dr. Morvain sputtered with indignation. "Absolutely not. Without constant monitoring, the prince could die in minutes." But Dr. Chen was already checking her portable devices. "Actually, I can maintain basic vital sign monitoring with battery-powered equipment. The risk would be manageable for a short test." Emperor Vextar had remained silent throughout the exchange, his massive frame radiating barely controlled tension. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected billions of lives. "Do it." The next hour was the longest in Marcus Webb's life. As the sophisticated medical equipment powered down one system at a time, the chamber fell into an unusual quiet. Only the soft hum of essential life support remained, along with the quiet beeping of Dr. Chen's handheld monitors. Marcus found himself standing next to Princess Lyraneth, both of them watching the prince's readings on the small human devices. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. "My daughter had a rare genetic condition," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the painful memory. "The doctors kept trying more and more sophisticated treatments, but nothing worked. It wasn't until we took her to a remote clinic with basic equipment that her condition stabilized. Sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective." 20 minutes into the test, Dr. Chen's readings showed a subtle but measurable improvement in Zethran's cellular activity. By 40 minutes, the change was undeniable. The prince's scales were beginning to show faint traces of their original golden luster. Dr. Morvain stared at the readings in disbelief. This cannot be," but the evidence was clear. After months of decline, Prince Zethran was finally showing signs of improvement. The human janitor's simple observation about electromagnetic interference had identified a crucial factor that the galaxy's most advanced medical minds had overlooked. As the test period ended and they began carefully reintroducing the necessary medical equipment with proper shielding, Emperor Vextar turned to Marcus with an expression that the human had never seen before on a Dracon face. Gratitude mixed with genuine respect. "Human," the Emperor said formally, "you may have saved my son's life. Name your reward." Marcus looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of beings who had conquered his world and enslaved his species. But in this moment, none of that mattered. He had done what he had always done, observed carefully, thought creatively, and offered help where it was needed. "Just let me finish the job," Marcus said quietly. "Your son isn't cured yet, and this was just the first step." Over the following days, Marcus Webb found himself in the unprecedented position of directing the medical care of the most important patient in the galaxy. The irony was not lost on him. A human janitor telling the Empire's greatest physicians how to treat their prince. But the results spoke for themselves. With the electromagnetic interference reduced, Prince Zethran had regained consciousness for the first time in a week. His scales were slowly returning to their natural golden hue, and his vital signs had stabilized at levels not seen since the early stages of his illness. However, Marcus knew that removing the interference was only treating a symptom, not the underlying disease. The electromagnetic fields were accelerating the cellular breakdown, Marcus explained to the assembled medical team during their daily briefing, but they didn't cause the crimson wasting. "We need to understand what did." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "The cellular analysis shows that something is attacking the prince's DNA at the molecular level, specifically targeting the genes that control scale regeneration and energy processing." "A targeted biological weapon?" suggested Admiral Kress, her forearms crossed in a defensive posture. Princess Lyraneth, who had become Marcus's most attentive student in what she termed human analytical methodology, shook her head. "The pattern is too organic, too random in some ways. If it were engineered, we would see more systematic destruction." Marcus had been studying everything he could find about Dracon biology, cross-referencing it with his decades of observation and his memories of similar cases from Earth. "Dr. Santos," he said, turning to the human physician who had been quietly reviewing her medical texts, "you mentioned something about autoimmune disorders yesterday. Can you explain that concept to the Draken doctors?" Dr. Santos stepped forward, her nervousness evident but her voice steady. "Sometimes a patient's own immune system can begin attacking healthy tissue. On Earth we see this in conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis. The body's defenses become confused and start destroying the very organs they're meant to protect." Dr. Morvain's scales rippled with skeptical patterns. "Impossible. Draken immune systems are the most sophisticated in the galaxy. We have never documented a case of autoimmune dysfunction in our species." "That's exactly the problem," Marcus said quietly. "Your immune systems are too sophisticated. They've been artificially enhanced for military purposes, haven't they?" The question hung in the air like a live plasma charge. Emperor Vextar's scales shifted to deep purple patterns that indicated dangerous territory was being approached. Princess Lyraneth was the first to understand the implications. "The genetic modifications. The military enhancement programs from 8 centuries ago," Marcus nodded. "Every Dracon born in the last 800 years has had their immune system genetically enhanced to resist biological weapons, survive in hostile environments, and process exotic energy sources. But genetic modifications have consequences across generations. Sometimes those consequences don't show up until much later." Dr. Chen was already pulling up genetic analysis data on her portable scanner. If Marcus is right, Prince Zethran's enhanced immune system might be attacking his own cellular structure because it's been programmed to be hypersensitive to genetic anomalies. "But why now?" Dr. Okafor asked. "Why would this condition suddenly appear after 8 centuries of successful enhancement?" Marcus had been thinking about this question for days, and his answer drew on everything he had learned about complex systems during his years maintaining the palace's infrastructure. Because genetic modifications accumulate over generations. Each generation carries the modifications of their parents plus new ones. Eventually, the system becomes so complex that it starts generating conflicts within itself. He gestured toward the prince, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. Prince Zethran represents the culmination of 8 centuries of genetic enhancement. His immune system is so advanced, so sophisticated, that it's begun interpreting his own enhanced genetics as foreign threats. Dr. Morvain stared at the readings in growing horror. "Are you suggesting that our genetic superiority is killing us?" "Not all of you," Marcus clarified, "but probably affecting more Drakons than you realize. I would guess that fertility rates have been declining, that certain types of illnesses are becoming more common, that your population growth has slowed despite medical advances." The silence that followed was deafening. Princess Lyraneth was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "The census reports. The medical statistics we've been attributing to improved quality of life leading to smaller family sizes. Emperor Vextar's massive frame seemed to deflate slightly. How many of our people are affected? Without extensive testing, impossible to say, Dr. Chen admitted. But if Marcus's theory is correct, this could be a species-wide issue that's been developing for generations. Marcus stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. The good news is that it's treatable. On Earth, we've learned to manage autoimmune disorders through a combination of immune system suppression and targeted therapy. The challenge will be adapting those techniques to work with Dracon physiology. Dr. Santos opened one of her ancient medical texts to a page she had bookmarked. The principles are the same regardless of species. We need to essentially retrain the prince's immune system to recognize his own enhanced genetics as normal, not threatening. How? Dr. Morvain asked, his professional pride clearly struggling with the necessity of learning from supposedly primitive human medicine. Marcus smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness he had shown since arriving at the palace, very carefully and very patiently. We're going to start with the oldest trick in the medical book, controlled exposure therapy. Over the next several hours, Marcus outlined a treatment plan that combined human immunological techniques with Dracon medical technology. The basic principle was simple. Gradually expose Prince Zethran's immune system to samples of his own enhanced genetic material in carefully controlled doses, allowing his defenses to slowly learn to accept rather than attack his modified DNA. The process would take weeks, possibly months, and required a level of precision that pushed both human and Dracon medical capabilities to their limits. But for the first time since the prince had fallen ill, there was genuine hope in the medical chamber. As the team began preparing for the first phase of treatment, Emperor Vextar approached Marcus privately. "Human," he said, his voice carrying tones that Marcus had never heard from a Dracon before. "You have given us hope when we had none. But I must ask, why? Your people have every reason to wish us harm." Marcus looked up at the massive ruler, remembering his daughter's smile, his wife's laugh, and all the dreams that had died when the Dracon Empire arrived at Earth. But he also remembered the oath he had taken when he first started working in hospitals, to help where help was needed, regardless of who needed it. Because this is what humans do, Marcus said simply. We solve problems. We fix things that are broken. And right now your son is broken. That's enough reason for me. For the first time in his reign, Emperor Vextar found himself truly understanding why his military advisors had warned him that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. Not because of their technology or their weapons, but because of their capacity to find solutions where others saw only obstacles, and their willingness to help even their enemies. The real healing was about to begin. The controlled exposure therapy began at dawn on the 7th day since Marcus's arrival at the palace. The treatment room had been completely redesigned according to his specifications. No electromagnetic interference, natural lighting when possible, and equipment that operated on principles of cooperation with Dracon biology, rather than forcing compliance through technological superiority. Prince Zethran was awake and alert for the first time in weeks. Though still weak, his golden scales had regained much of their luster, and the bioluminescent patterns that indicated his emotional state were finally responding normally. As Marcus prepared the first dose of the immune therapy, the prince spoke for the first time since the treatment began. "So you are the human who believes he can cure what our greatest physicians could not," Zethran said, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertones of the Draken royal family. Marcus looked up from his preparation, meeting the prince's large reptilian eyes without flinching. "I'm the human who thinks your doctors have been trying to fix the wrong problem, Your Highness." The prince's scales flickered with patterns that Marcus had learned indicated amusement. "My sister tells me you have a most unusual perspective on medical treatment. She says you believe in working with the patient's body rather than conquering it." "That's the difference between human and Dracon thinking," Marcus replied, drawing the prepared solution into a specialized injector that Dr. Chen had modified for Dracon physiology. "You approach everything like a battle to be won. Sometimes healing requires surrender, not victory." As Marcus administered the first injection, Princess Lyraneth entered the chamber carrying a stack of data tablets. Over the past week, she had become fascinated by human problem-solving methodologies, and had been conducting her own research into the scope of the genetic enhancement issue. "Brother," she said, her scales displaying patterns of concern mixed with excitement, "you need to see this. Marcus's theory about generational accumulation of genetic modifications. I've been analyzing medical records from across the empire. Activated a holographic display that showed statistical trends spanning 8 centuries. The data was undeniable. Fertility rates had indeed been declining steadily since the genetic enhancement programs began. Autoimmune disorders were being misdiagnosed as environmental factors, and lifespan projections had started decreasing for the first time in Dracon history. Despite advancing medical technology, Prince Zethron studied the display with growing alarm. How many of our people are affected? Potentially millions, Princess Lyraneth admitted. The symptoms are subtle and develop slowly, so they've been attributed to other causes. But the pattern is clear once you know what to look for. Marcus had been monitoring the prince's response to the first injection, and the results were encouraging. The cellular regeneration rate had increased by 12% in just 2 hours, and there were no signs of adverse reactions. "The treatment is working," he announced. "We can proceed to the second phase." Dr. Morvain, who had been observing the process with barely concealed skepticism, stepped forward to verify the readings. His expression of grudging amazement was unmistakable. "The cellular regeneration is not just improved, it's optimized. I have never seen Draken physiology function at this level of efficiency." "That's because you've been fighting against your own biology for centuries," Marcus explained as he prepared the next injection. "Human medicine learned a long time ago that the body knows how to heal itself if you give it the right conditions and remove the obstacles." Dr. Chen had been running comparative analyses on blood samples taken before and after treatment. "Marcus, these results are extraordinary. Not only is the autoimmune response diminishing, but the prince's enhanced genetic modifications are actually functioning better than before. It's as if his immune system is learning to optimize rather than attack." Over the following days, the improvement in Prince Zethron's condition became impossible to ignore. His scales had returned to their full golden brilliance, his strength was increasing daily, and cognitive tests showed that his mental acuity was actually superior to his pre-illness baseline. More importantly, he was able to process multiple atmospheric compositions again, and his natural resistance to radiation had returned to normal levels. But the real breakthrough came when Marcus suggested testing the treatment on other Drakons who might be experiencing early-stage symptoms of the same condition. Emperor Vextar, despite his initial resistance to the idea that his people might be systematically ill, agreed to a limited trial. The results were astonishing. Draken military personnel who had been experiencing unexplained fatigue found their energy levels returning to peak performance. Scientists who had been struggling with concentration difficulties reported enhanced cognitive abilities. Even fertility specialists noted improved success rates in couples who had been having difficulty conceiving. Word of the human janitor's success began spreading throughout the palace, then to the military command structure, and eventually across the capital city. The response was complex, gratitude mixed with embarrassment, relief tempered by the uncomfortable realization that their supposed genetic superiority had been slowly poisoning them for generations. Admiral Kress approached Marcus during one of his treatment sessions with the prince. "Human," she said, her forearms displaying the formal gesture of respect typically reserved for high-ranking Dracon officials. "My nephew is a fighter pilot. He has been experiencing symptoms that we now recognize as early-stage immune dysfunction. Would you be willing to treat him?" The request was significant. For a high-ranking Dracon military officer to ask a human for medical assistance represented a fundamental shift in the power dynamics that had defined the Empire for half a century. Marcus's response was characteristically simple. "Bring him in. Let's see what we can do." As more Dracons came forward seeking treatment, Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of training Dracon physicians in human medical techniques. The irony was not lost on anyone. The supposedly primitive species was teaching their conquerors how to heal themselves. Dr. Morvain, who had initially been the most skeptical of Marcus's methods, became his most dedicated student. "Your approach to medicine," he admitted during one of their teaching sessions, "requires a level of patience and observation that our culture has not traditionally valued. We have been so focused on technological solutions that we forgot to listen to what the body was trying to tell us. Princess Lyraneth had been documenting the entire process, and her reports were reaching the highest levels of government across the empire. The implications were staggering. Not only could the treatment cure individual cases, but it might be necessary to implement it on a species-wide scale to prevent the eventual collapse of Dracon civilization. Emperor Vextar summoned Marcus to a private audience in his personal chambers, a honor that had never been granted to any non-Dracon. The massive ruler's scales displayed patterns of deep contemplation as he spoke. "Human," the Emperor said, "you have done more than save my son's life. You have potentially saved my entire species. The question that troubles me is simple. Why? Your people have suffered under our rule. You had every reason to let us slowly destroy ourselves." Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. "Your Majesty, there's something humans understand that maybe Dracons don't. Strength isn't about domination or conquest. Real strength is about lifting others up, solving problems that seem impossible, and choosing to help even when you have every reason not to. My daughter taught me that before she died. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to heal instead of hurt." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, his scales cycling through patterns that Marcus had learned indicated deep emotional processing. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decisions that would reshape the galaxy. "Marcus Webb," Emperor Vextar said formally, "I hereby grant you full medical authority within the Dracon Empire. Whatever resources you need, whatever personnel you require, whatever changes must be made to save our people, you have my complete support." The human janitor, who had started the week cleaning floors, had just been given the power to revolutionize medicine across 47 star systems. But as Marcus looked out the Emperor's viewport at the sprawling city below, he knew the real work was just beginning. 6 months after Marcus Webb had first entered the Imperial Medical Chamber, the transformation of Dracon medical practices had spread across 17 star systems. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save one prince had evolved into the largest medical revolution in galactic history. The Human Medical Integration Program, as it came to be officially known, established treatment centers on every major Dracon world. Each facility was staffed by teams of human physicians working alongside Dracon doctors, sharing knowledge and techniques that bridged the gap between technological advancement and biological understanding. Marcus found himself traveling between worlds aboard Imperial starships, training medical personnel and overseeing the expansion of the treatment protocols. The irony of his situation was not lost on him. The same transport ships that had once carried human slaves to distant worlds now carried him as an honored guest, seeking to heal the very beings who had conquered Earth. Prince Zethran had not only recovered completely, but had become one of the strongest advocates for the new medical approaches. His public appearances throughout the Empire served as living proof that human methods could enhance rather than replace Dracon capabilities. The prince's scales now exhibited a golden luminescence that had never been recorded in Dracon medical literature, and his physical and mental capabilities exceeded even the theoretical limits of his genetic modifications. The human approach to medicine has taught us something fundamental about ourselves, Prince Zethran announced during a broadcast to the Imperial fleet. "We believed that strength came from forcing our bodies to perform beyond their natural limits. But true optimization comes from understanding and working with our biological systems, not against them." The success of the medical program had unexpected consequences throughout the Empire. As Dracons began experiencing enhanced physical and mental performance through the corrected immune therapies, their approach to other challenges began to shift as well. Military strategies started incorporating human concepts of adaptive thinking, rather than relying solely on overwhelming force. Scientific research began valuing observation and patience alongside technological innovation. Dr. Chen had been appointed as director of the Human Dracon Medical Exchange, overseeing research facilities that were developing treatments for dozens of previously incurable conditions. Her work with Dr. Morvain had produced breakthrough therapies that combined human immunological understanding with Dracon biotechnology, creating medical solutions that neither species could have achieved alone. The most remarkable discovery, Dr. Chen explained to Marcus during one of his visits to the primary research facility, is that the treatment protocols you developed don't just cure the autoimmune dysfunction. They actually optimize the original genetic enhancements. making them more efficient and stable than their designers ever intended. Marcus studied the research data with the same careful attention he had once applied to maintenance schedules and repair protocols. "The body wants to work properly," he said simply. "Sometimes it just needs help remembering how Dr. Santos had established a unique position within the Empire as a specialist in what she termed traditional biological wisdom, the application of ancient human medical principles to alien physiology. Her work with herbal compounds and natural healing processes had proven surprisingly effective when combined with Dracon biotechnology, leading to treatments that were both sophisticated and sustainable. The most significant development had come from Princess Lyra Neth's research into the long-term implications of the medical revolution. Her analysis suggested that the corrected genetic modifications would not only solve the current crisis but would actually improve the overall stability and longevity of Dracon genetic enhancement for future generations. "We are essentially teaching our genome to evolve more efficiently," she explained to the Imperial Science Council. "The human medical approach has given us the tools to guide our own biological development in ways that work with natural selection rather than against it. But the medical revolution had also created unexpected political complications. Several vassal species within the Empire began demanding access to human medical expertise, arguing that if such treatments could enhance Dracon capabilities, they might be equally beneficial for other species. The requests forced Emperor Vextar to confront fundamental questions about the nature of imperial power and the relationship between conquerors and conquered. The solution came from an unexpected source. During a medical conference on Draconis Prime, Marcus was approached by Dr. Silthek, a representative of the Crystalline Consortium, one of the Empire's most advanced vassal civilizations. "Human Marcus," Dr. Silthek said, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated formal respect. "My people have observed the success of your medical interventions with the Dracon population. We believe that human analytical methods might be applicable to certain challenges our species faces with energy absorption disorders." Marcus listened carefully as Dr. Silthek described medical conditions that seemed familiar, despite the vast differences in physiology. The crystalline beings were experiencing problems with their natural ability to process and store stellar energy, conditions that appeared to be side effects of technological enhancements similar to those that had affected the Dracons. "It sounds like the same basic problem," Marcus told Emperor Vextar during their weekly medical briefing. "Different species, different symptoms, but the same root cause. Technological modifications creating unintended conflicts with natural biological processes." The Emperor's scales displayed patterns of deep consideration. "You are suggesting that this medical crisis extends beyond our species?" "I'm suggesting that any civilization advanced enough to modify their own biology has probably run into similar problems," Marcus replied. "The question is whether you want to help them solve these issues or wait for them to figure it out themselves." The decision to expand human medical assistance to other species within the Empire represented a fundamental shift in Dracon policy. For the first time in their history, the Empire began offering aid to vassal civilizations not as a tool of control, but as a genuine attempt to improve the lives of their subjects. The results exceeded all expectations. The Crystalline Consortium's energy absorption disorders were indeed similar to the Dracon immune dysfunction, and adapted versions of Marcus's treatment protocols proved highly effective. The insectoid hives reported success with treating reproductive disorders that had been limiting their population growth for decades. Even the machine-augmented species found that human approaches to biological-technological integration improved the compatibility between their organic and artificial components. Word of the medical successes spread beyond the Empire's borders, reaching independent civilizations and even hostile powers. Diplomatic communications began arriving at the Imperial Palace, not threats or demands, but requests for medical assistance and offers of cooperation in exchange for access to human healing techniques. Admiral Kress brought one such communication to Marcus's attention during his weekly treatment session with recovering Dracon personnel. The Ethereal Collective has offered to share their dimensional manipulation technology in exchange for human medical consultation on what they describe as essence degradation syndrome, she reported. Marcus reviewed the medical data included with the diplomatic message, his expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. Same pattern again, he concluded. They've been manipulating their own energy-based biology for so long that their systems are starting to conflict with themselves. As news of successful treatments spread across the galaxy, Marcus found himself at the center of a transformation that extended far beyond medicine. The human approach of patient observation, adaptive thinking, and biological cooperation was being applied to engineering challenges, diplomatic negotiations, and even military strategy throughout the Empire. Prince Zethran had become the foremost advocate for what he termed the human paradigm, and the idea that sustainable solutions came from understanding and working with existing systems rather than forcing compliance through superior technology. My father's empire was built on the principle that strength conquers all obstacles, the prince explained during a gathering of imperial governors. But Marcus has shown us that true strength comes from recognizing when cooperation is more effective than conquest, when healing is more powerful than harming. The transformation was not without its challenges. Some traditional Dracon military leaders resisted the new approaches, arguing that showing compassion to vassal species would be interpreted as weakness. Several attempted coups were discovered and defused, though notably the conspirators were offered medical treatment for the stress-related disorders that had contributed to their extremist thinking, rather than being executed according to traditional imperial justice. But as the medical revolution continued to spread and evolve, it became clear that Marcus Webb had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. The human janitor who had simply wanted to help a dying patient had accidentally triggered a transformation that was reshaping the fundamental nature of interstellar civilization. The greatest changes, however, were yet to come. 2 years after the medical revolution began, the Galactic Medical Congress convened for the first time in 3 centuries. Representatives from 49 civilizations gathered on Neutral Space Station, Harmony Point, to discuss what many scholars were calling the most significant advancement in biological sciences since the discovery of genetic manipulation itself. Marcus Webb stood before an assembly that included beings he could never have imagined during his years as a hospital janitor on Earth. Crystalline entities that lived for millennia, energy-based life forms that existed partially outside normal space-time, hive minds that shared consciousness across multiple bodies, and machine hybrid species that blended organic and artificial components in ways that defied traditional biological categories. Ladies, gentlemen, and entities, Marcus began, his voice carried by translation systems that converted his words into electromagnetic patterns, chemical signals, quantum fluctuations, and dozens of other communication methods. 2 years ago, I was cleaning floors in a palace and trying to figure out why a sick prince wasn't getting better. Today we're here because that prince's illness taught us something important about the relationship between technology and biology. The response from the assembled delegates was immediate and complex. Harmonic resonances from the crystalline consortium, bioluminescent patterns from aquatic species, electromagnetic pulses from energy beings, and the traditional applause of various humanoid civilizations created a symphony of approval that had never been heard before in galactic history. Dr. Chen, now bearing the title of Director of Interspecies Medical Research, presented the statistical evidence of the revolution's success. The data was staggering. Across 47 star systems, medical outcomes had improved by an average of 300%. Genetic stability had increased in every species that had participated in the human-developed treatment protocols. Most remarkably, several civilizations had reported breakthrough discoveries in other fields after applying human analytical methods to non-medical problems. The human approach to problem-solving, Dr. Chen explained, appears to be uniquely suited to identifying and resolving conflicts between technological advancement and biological optimization. We believe this is due to humanity's relatively recent technological development, combined with their species' natural tendency toward adaptive thinking. Princess Lyraneth, now serving as the Empire's Minister of Interspecies Affairs, presented her research into the broader implications of the medical revolution. The treatment protocols developed by Marcus Webb have applications that extend far beyond medicine, she announced. We have successfully applied human analytical methods to solving resource distribution inefficiencies, reducing conflict between different species within the Empire, and even improving the performance of our starship navigation systems. The most significant presentation came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Kethvar of the previously hostile Void Collective had requested permission to address the Congress. Despite the fact that his civilization had been at war with the Draken Empire for over 2 centuries, the Void Collective has observed the changes within the Draken Empire with great interest. Ambassador Kethvar announced, his voice emanating from a containment suit that allowed his energy-based form to interact with matter-based beings. 3 months ago, our leadership made the unprecedented decision to request medical assistance for what your human doctor might recognize as technological integration syndrome. Marcus felt a familiar flutter of recognition as the ambassador described symptoms that followed the same pattern he had first identified in Prince Zetheron. The Void Collective's attempts to merge consciousness with pure energy had created conflicts between their original biological matrix and their enhanced energy forms, resulting in a slow degradation of their ability to maintain coherent individual identity. Human Marcus, Ambassador Kethvar continued, we formally request your assistance in adapting your treatment protocols to energy-based life forms. In exchange, the Void Collective offers to share our consciousness expansion technologies and to discuss terms for ending our conflict with the Draken Empire. The offer sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. The Void Collective had never before sought cooperation with matter-based civilizations, and their technology for consciousness manipulation was considered the most advanced in the known galaxy. More importantly, their agreement to end hostilities could bring peace to sectors that had been war zones for generations. Marcus looked out at the assembly of beings who represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization, remembering his daughter's last words, "Daddy, you always know how to fix things." He had spent decades fixing broken equipment, but somehow that same careful attention to understanding how systems worked had led him to fix something much more important. Ambassador Kethvar, Marcus replied, I'll need to study your species' physiology and understand how consciousness integration works in energy-based life forms. But if the problem follows the same pattern we've seen in other species, I believe we can help. The negotiations that followed lasted 3 days, but they resulted in the first peace treaty between matter-based and energy-based civilizations in recorded history. More importantly, they established the framework for the Galactic Cooperative Medical Initiative, a joint program that would pool the medical knowledge and resources of 49 civilizations to address biological and technological integration challenges across the galaxy. Emperor Vextar attended the treaty signing ceremony aboard the neutral station, the first time a Draken ruler had participated in a multilateral agreement as an equal partner, rather than a conquering power. His speech to the assembled delegates reflected the fundamental changes that had transformed not just his empire, but his understanding of what strength really meant. For 3 millennia, the Draken Empire has believed that power came from the ability to impose our will upon others, the Emperor declared. But a human janitor has taught us that true power comes from the ability to solve problems that others cannot solve, to heal what others consider incurable, and to find cooperation where others see only conflict. The ceremony was interrupted by an urgent communication from Dr. Morvain, who had remained on Draconis Prime to continue research into long-term genetic stability. His message was brief but revolutionary. The corrected genetic modifications were not only stable across generations, but were actually improving with each successive generation. The Draken species was evolving in real time, becoming stronger, smarter, and more biologically efficient than they had ever been in their natural state. The implications are staggering, Dr. Morvain reported via holographic transmission. The human treatment protocols haven't just cured our autoimmune dysfunction. They've taught our genetic code how to optimize itself continuously. We are becoming a genuinely improved species, not through forced technological enhancement, but through biological cooperation with our own enhanced genetics. Similar reports began arriving from other civilizations that had implemented the human-developed protocols. The crystalline consortium was achieving energy absorption efficiency levels that exceeded their theoretical maximums. The insectoid hives were developing new forms of collective consciousness that maintained individual identity while enhancing group cooperation. Even the machine hybrid species were reporting unprecedented levels of organic-artificial integration. Dr. Santos, who had become the galaxy's leading expert on traditional biological wisdom, offered the explanation that made sense of all the diverse improvements. Human medicine has always been based on the principle that the body knows how to heal itself if you give it the right conditions, she told the assembled delegates. What we've discovered is that this principle applies to any biological system, regardless of how technologically enhanced it might be. We're not imposing solutions. We're helping each species discover the solutions that work best for their unique biology. As the Congress concluded and the delegates prepared to return to their homeworlds, Marcus found himself in a private meeting with Prince Zethran and Princess Lyraneth. The prince's transformation over the past 2 years had been remarkable. Not just his recovery from the crimson wasting, but his evolution into a leader who understood that strength and wisdom could be compatible. "Marcus," Prince Zethran said, his scales displaying patterns of deep gratitude, "you have given us more than our health. You have given us a new understanding of what it means to be strong, what it means to be civilized, and what it means to be truly advanced." Princess Lyraneth added, "The human approach to problem solving is being taught in schools throughout the Empire now. Children learn to observe carefully, think creatively, and seek cooperation before attempting conquest. You have changed not just our medicine, but our entire culture." Marcus looked out through the station's massive viewport at the stars beyond, thinking about the journey that had brought him from cleaning hospital floors on Earth to standing at the center of galactic transformation. "I just did what any human would do," he said quietly. "We see a problem, we try to understand it, and we look for ways to help. It's not magic, it's just being human." But as the delegations departed and news of the new galactic cooperation spread throughout the civilized galaxy, it became clear that being human, with all the curiosity, creativity, and compassion that implied, might be exactly what the galaxy had been waiting for. The greatest test of the new alliance, however, was about to begin. 5 years after Marcus Webb first entered the Imperial Medical Chamber, the galaxy faced its greatest crisis since the formation of the first interstellar civilizations. The entropy plague had emerged from the galactic core, a mysterious phenomenon that was causing the fundamental breakdown of biological systems across multiple species simultaneously. Unlike the autoimmune disorders that Marcus had successfully treated, the entropy plague appeared to attack the basic molecular structures that allowed life to exist. Entire worlds had gone silent within weeks of the first reported cases. The most advanced medical technologies in the galaxy had proven completely ineffective, and the plague was spreading along trade routes faster than any known biological agent. Marcus stood in the emergency command center aboard the medical research vessel Harmony, watching real-time reports arrive from across the galaxy. The ship itself was a testament to the cooperation that had emerged from the medical revolution, a joint construction project involving technology from 27 different civilizations, designed specifically for responding to galaxy-wide medical emergencies. "The pattern doesn't make sense," Dr. Chen reported, her voice tight with frustration. "The plague affects different species in completely different ways, but the end result is always the same. Total biological system failure within 48 hours of symptom onset." Dr. Morvain, now serving as the Draken Empire's representative to the Galactic Medical Cooperative, added his analysis. "We have confirmed cases in crystalline life forms, energy beings, hive minds, individual biological entities, and machine hybrid species. There is no common biological factor that explains how a single agent could affect such diverse forms of life." Prince Zethran, who had become the military coordinator for the crisis response, presented the strategic situation. 17 star systems have gone completely dark. No communications, no life sign readings, no response to any form of contact. The expansion rate suggests that within 6 months, the plague will reach the core worlds of every major civilization in the galaxy. Marcus studied the data patterns on the holographic displays, his mind working through the same systematic analysis that had served him for decades. Something about the plague's behavior reminded him of a maintenance problem he had encountered years ago, a cascading system failure that had shut down an entire sector of the palace's environmental controls. "Show me the timeline again," Marcus requested. "Not the biological progression, but the geographical spread pattern." Princess Lyraneth, now bearing the title of Galactic Cooperation Coordinator, activated a star map that showed the plague's expansion over time. The pattern was clearly visible. The phenomenon was spreading along established trade routes and communication networks, but it wasn't following the typical patterns of biological contamination. "It's not a disease," Marcus said quietly, his realization sending a chill through the assembled experts. "It's a signal." The command center fell silent as the implications of his statement became clear. Dr. Santos, who had been analyzing traditional biological responses to unknown pathogens, was the first to understand. "A signal that disrupts biological processes?" "More than that," Marcus replied, his mind racing through the possibilities. "A signal that creates conflicts between biological systems and their technological enhancements. Look at the pattern. It affects enhanced species first and most severely, then spreads to any biological systems that have been exposed to advanced technology." Dr. Chen immediately began running new analyses based on Marcus's hypothesis. "If you're right, then every civilization that has achieved technological advancement becomes vulnerable to this signal. The more advanced the technology, the more severe the disruption." Ambassador Kethvar of the Void Collective, who had been participating via quantum communication link, offered crucial information. "The Void Collective has detected unusual subspace resonance patterns emanating from the galactic core. We initially dismissed them as natural phenomena, but if Marcus is correct about a signal-based attack, these resonances could be the delivery mechanism." The revelation transformed their understanding of the crisis completely. They weren't facing a biological plague, but a deliberately engineered attack designed to exploit the relationship between technological advancement and biological systems. The more sophisticated a civilization's enhancements, the more vulnerable they became to the disruptive signal. "Who would do this?" Prince Zethron asked, his scales displaying patterns of barely controlled rage. "What civilization would attempt to destroy all advanced life in the galaxy?" The answer came from an unexpected source, Dr. Yilneth, the insectoid researcher who had been part of the original team trying to save Prince Zethron, had been analyzing historical records from the galactic archives. "I have found references to a species called the Primalists," she announced. "According to ancient records, they were a technologically advanced civilization that voluntarily abandoned all technological enhancement approximately 50,000 years ago." Marcus felt the familiar pattern recognition that had served him so well clicking into place. They didn't abandon technology because they couldn't handle it, he realized. They abandoned it because they discovered what we've been learning, that technological enhancement can create biological conflicts. But instead of finding ways to solve those conflicts, they decided that technology itself was the problem. Princess Lyraneth was already accessing deeper historical archives. The records indicate that the Primalists retreated to the galactic core after their technological abandonment. They were believed to have died out millennia ago, but if they survived and have been observing the development of other civilizations, they would see our technological advancement as a threat to natural biological evolution, Dr. Morvain concluded. From their perspective, we are all infected with a technological plague that corrupts pure biological existence. The strategic implications were staggering. The Primalists weren't trying to conquer the galaxy. They were trying to cure it by eliminating any species that had chosen technological enhancement over natural biological development. Their signal was designed to cause the same types of conflicts between technology and biology that Marcus had been solving, but amplified to lethal levels. "The good news," Marcus announced to the assembled team, "is that we know how to treat conflicts between technology and biology. The bad news is that we need to do it on a galactic scale, and we need to do it fast." The solution required the largest cooperative effort in recorded history. Every civilization that had participated in the medical revolution would need to implement coordinated treatment protocols simultaneously. The human-developed techniques for resolving technological-biological conflicts would need to be adapted for 49 different species and deployed across thousands of worlds within a matter of weeks. Marcus worked 18-hour days, traveling between worlds and coordinating treatment protocols with medical teams who spoke in quantum fluctuations, chemical signals, harmonic resonances, and electromagnetic patterns. The irony was not lost on him. The same cooperative approach that had saved Prince Zethron was now being used to save the entire galaxy. The breakthrough came when Dr. Santos suggested that they didn't need to cure each individual affected by the entropy signal. They needed to create a counter-signal that would help biological systems resist the disruption. Using principles borrowed from human immunology and enhanced with technology from all 49 cooperating civilizations, they developed what they called the Harmony Protocol. The protocol worked by broadcasting a counter-signal that taught biological systems to recognize and resist the primalist disruption, essentially creating galaxy-wide immunity to the technological biological conflict weapon. The implementation required every major communication network, every starship, and every advanced technological device to simultaneously broadcast the counter-signal. As the Harmony Protocol activated across the galaxy, the effects were immediate and dramatic. Worlds that had gone silent began responding to communications. The expansion of the entropy plague stopped, then began reversing as biological systems recovered from the disruption. Most remarkably, species that had been affected by the protocol reported improved integration between their biological and technological systems. The final confrontation with the primalists was not a battle, but a conversation. When their weapon failed to achieve its intended effect, a delegation of primalist ships emerged from the galactic core to investigate. The beings who appeared on the viewscreens of the Harmony were unlike anything the assembled civilizations had encountered: ancient, powerful, and radiating a purity of biological perfection that was both beautiful and terrifying. "You have corrupted yourselves with technology," the primalist spokesman declared, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested evolutionary development far beyond any known species. "We sought to free you from this corruption, to return you to the pure biological state that represents true life." Marcus, speaking for the Galactic Medical Cooperative, responded with the same patient tone he had used when explaining treatment protocols to skeptical Dracon physicians. "We understand your concern about technological corruption. We've experienced those problems ourselves. But we've learned that the solution isn't to